It is an honor to be with you this morning. I don't take it lightly that Pastor Drew entrusts me with being up here on this stage. And I have been sitting under Pastor Drew's leadership since my 10th grade of high school. And it's been an honor of my life to be able to sit under his leadership, to learn from him, and then to now be on staff at Lift Church and to continue to learn from him and continue to sit under his leadership. We are in good hands here at Lift Church with Pastor Drew and Lauren. Can we give it up for them? We are in good hands here at Lift Church. And one of the things I love about Pastor Drew, and media team, you can go ahead and put that graphic up there. I saw this on Facebook. It said, "Make pastors uncool again." And you're going to find out very quickly about me as I'm preaching. You guys don't have to worry about this with me. I was never cool, so there's no making me uncool again. I have remained uncool for most of my life. So you guys don't have to worry about this. There was a long post that went with this that was awesome. But we have the great honor of having pastors on staff with Pastor JT and Drew who are extremely cool, but also love Jesus and serve him well. But it is an honor to be with you guys today. And I am going to very quickly off the bat reveal to you how uncool I am. We're going to talk about the greatest love story in the history of the universe today. And I know what you're thinking. You're going to talk about Jesus. I am, but that's not the story I'm talking about. I'm talking about the story of me and my wife. Come on, right? Great love story. And it started in the 10th grade of high school. And in my hand, I hold letters that I wrote to her, my 10th grade of high school. I went away for a month and served and was a server in a dining hall for a month at his camp. I didn't have my cell phone. There was no phone. The only way I could communicate was through letters, right? I think I wrote 16 in all over 31 days. That's a little overboard, I know. I was thinking the same thing. But I want to read you a couple of these letters I wrote, just to give you a little insight into what I was working with in 10th grade. I'm going to warn you, these are rough. And I'm going to embarrass myself a lot by reading these, but I'm doing it for you. And after I'm done reading them, we're going to immediately burn them so that no eyes could see. But you guys are the first people to hear it, besides me and my wife. We're the only people who have seen these letters. This is day 16. So I've been there for 16 days, and I'm serving, and for some reason I write this. I said, "At brunch today, I got some purple stuff on my hand." I don't know what it's referring to there. No clue. "And it caught on fire. But it didn't burn me. It was really cool. So yes, I lit myself on fire today. Ha ha." And then I say, "A giant spider was crawling on me when we were cleaning the camp. And I didn't freak out at all. I just calmly flicked it off. You would have been so proud." Who says that to your 10th grade girlfriend a month after you start dating? That's not what she wants to hear. You know what I mean? That her man should be so proud that I didn't freak out this spider. But that's not even the worst part of this. I'm getting to it here. This is how I end this letter where I pour my heart out to her, I said, "Well, it is dark and I'm sweating. So I'm going to try to go to bed. Good night." That's how I end the letter, right? It's dark and I'm sweating. Good night. Like, who writes that, right? I mean, 10th grade Aaron, you got to have more game than that, right? But then I'm rereading these letters, and I see this one-liner, and I'm like, 10th grade Aaron, wow. It's like, you came up with that? I'm pretty sure I didn't come up with this. I must have heard it somewhere, because there's no way I had the creativity of this. But I write this letter where I'm pouring my heart out to her, and this is day 3. This isn't even halfway through. This is before I wrote that. This is day 3. And I end the letter with this: "Well, I miss you more than the desert misses the rain. Good night." I mean, come on. 10th grade Aaron, that was some good moves right there. I mean, that was a good one-liner. But to be honest with you, when I read that, I cringed so hard. I was like, oh, no, 10th grade Aaron, don't do that. You're like, oh, no. But for real, I do want to talk about this awesome love story in the Bible, in the book of Ruth. And I really do believe that if you take every love story that you've ever heard, every romantic movie, and you put the best parts together to make the most romantic movie ever, it's got nothing on the book of Ruth. Absolutely nothing. In fact, gentlemen, you don't even have to plan date night this week. All you got to do is sit down and read the book of Ruth. That is romantic enough. This is the greatest love story, I think, in the Bible. And in order to understand this story completely, there's a couple little details in there, here and there, about the culture of Israel and Moab, which we're going to talk about, that we have to understand to really understand this story. So I want to ask that you bear with me while I nerd out a little bit on these details, but I truly believe that the Lord has something for us today. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you for this day. God, I pray more of you and less of me. God, that you would speak. Father, that you would hide me behind the cross and that you would shine through because we're here for you today. I love you. Amen. So in Ruth chapter 1, the beginning of this great love story, Ruth isn't even in the picture yet. There's a famine in Israel, and there's a guy named Elimelech. Say that with me, Elimelech. Right? I'm going to butcher that the rest of the time, but I wanted to get it right at least once. So there's Elimelech and there's Naomi. And they moved from Israel to Moab because of this famine. They're in search of food. And what you got to know about Moab, it's the land of the Moabites. The Moabites came out of a relationship of incest and sexual immorality. And because of this conflict between Israel and Moab, there's a lot of death and a lot of pain. There's a lot of animosity between the people of Moab, the Moabites, and the Israelites. And so an Israelite moving to Moab doesn't happen. That just does not happen in this age. And what definitely doesn't happen is Naomi and Elimelech's sons marry two Moabite women named Ruth and Orpah. I don't know who names their kid Orpah. I hope you guys don't have a kid named Orpah in here. If you do, it's a beautiful name. But we've had a lot of babies happen in Lyft this year, and I'm happy to say I don't think any of them were named Orpah. We have some awesome babies, but her name was Orpah. So we got Ruth, and we got Orpah, and they're Moabite women, and this doesn't happen. Israelite men were not supposed to marry Moabite women, but it happens. And so a series of events happens, and Elimelech dies. The head of the household dies, and then further in the famine, his two sons die. And so Naomi loses her husband and her two sons in a short time. And what you got to know about this culture is if a son dies, his brother would then take on his wife as his own to take care of her, to provide for her, to provide a son. But in this scenario, both sons died. There's nobody to take care of Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah. They're alone. No family, no food, no hope. And so we see as the famine ends and they hear that there's bread in Israel, there's more food in Israel. So Naomi's like, I'm moving back to Israel. And she tells Ruth and Orpah, go away from me. You don't want to be with me right now. And Orpah's like, peace, I'm out of here. She gets out of there. Orpah leaves. But then Ruth refuses to leave Naomi. And so Ruth goes with Naomi to Israel. And Naomi says this. She says, don't call me Naomi. Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me? Naomi hits rock bottom. She loses her husband, she loses her two sons, and she has no food, no family, nowhere to go. And she's like, call me Mara because I'm bitter. Rock bottom, no hope. But this is where our story gets good. We go into Ruth chapter 2, and Naomi and Ruth come into Bethlehem at a moment called the harvest of barley. And it's important because the famine has just ended, and now they're harvesting the crops, and food is coming back to Israel. But Ruth and Naomi are poor, they're hungry, they have no family, nowhere to go. And we find ourselves in this situation where Ruth, a Moabite, finds herself in Israel, in a land of people who don't like her just because she's a Moabite. She's poor, and in this culture, she's a woman, and she's a foreigner. They don't want to be around her. And this is what Ruth says to Naomi. It says, one day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do so. So in this culture, if you were poor, you didn't have any food, there was laws in place where you could go behind the harvesters and pick up the scraps, right? And so in this story, we're reading this and we're like, all right, she's picking up barley. There's nothing, like, what does that have to do with anything, right? And it's getting good here because she's picking up the scraps. And it says, as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. A relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. You see, because there was no sons to take care of Naomi and Ruth, there would be something called a family redeemer. And that had to be a part of their family, a part of their tribe. And Boaz just happens to be a part of Elimelech's family, one who is able to redeem Naomi and Ruth and take care of her. And it says, as it happened, Ruth just happened to go to his field. Ruth had no idea who Boaz was, and she ends up in his field. And today's culture, that's just like saying, as luck would have it, Ruth ended up in Boaz's field. And in Ruth chapter 2, we see over and over again evidence of God's sovereignty and God's plan in Ruth's life. Right? It's like you're watching a romantic movie, right, fellas, with your girl. We bite the bullet sometimes when we watch those romantic movies. And events start happening, and you're like, oh, come on, that doesn't just happen. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like in the Notebook, it just starts raining, and he runs out, and it's this epic scene where they're like hugging in the rain. I'm like, that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? That just doesn't happen. These events just don't come into play. And then you look over to your wife or your significant other, and they're crying, or they're smiling ear to ear, or in the case of Aubrey and Pastor JT, Aubrey looks to Pastor JT, and he's crying. That's just Pastor JT, I mean. But it's like these events are just happening in perfect sync to put Ruth in Boaz's field. As it happened, Ruth ends up in Boaz's field. And so the story continues, and Boaz says this. In verse 5, it says, who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to? Translation for that is, check her out. Is that, who is that fine girl over there? I got to get to know her. I got to know her. And so he's like, who does she belong to? And for us, that probably sounds super weird. Who does she belong to? But in this culture, what he's asking is, what family does she belong to? Because it's important, because Boaz is a part of Elimelech's family. And so he's about to find out that Ruth is a part of that family. Ruth is a person that he is able to redeem. But Ruth has no idea yet. And the story continues, and it brings me to our first point that I want you guys to hear today. Number one is that love takes initiative. Love takes initiative. In verse 8, it says, Boaz went over and said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't bother to go to any other field. Stay right behind the young woman working in my field. He says, stay right here. Boaz takes initiative. He goes to Ruth and he says, stay right here. Stay in my field. I'll take care of you. Now you got to understand, this is a Moabite woman. This is a foreigner, a poor Moabite woman that Israelites don't even associate with, let alone the Lord of the harvest, let alone the man of standing that Boaz is. Imagine the lines that Boaz is crossing just to love Ruth well. He's crossing every line possible. And this sets up this great conversation between Ruth and Boaz. It's a great, beautiful, poetic conversation. I mean, it's like you would see in a movie. They're talking, and Boaz is like, stay in my field, and Ruth is like, you honor me, and she's like, I mean, it's getting good, right? I mean, just imagine, put yourself in this story. It's getting good here. And my question to you today if love takes initiative, husbands, when was the last time you took initiative and loved your wife unconditionally? And wives, you're not getting off. Wives, when was the last time you took initiative and loved your husband unconditionally? And I don't know if you're ready for this one. Republicans, when was the last time you took initiative and loved a Democrat? And Democrats, when was the last time you took initiative and loved a Republican unconditionally? When was the last time any of us took initiative and loved our neighbor unconditionally, without being asked, without being prompted, and just did it? Love takes initiative. And Boaz didn't just love her by taking initiative. My second point about love, number 2, is love goes beyond what is expected or deserved. Love goes beyond what is expected or deserved. And so we continue in our story of Ruth and Boaz, this great love story that we're engulfed in right now. And in verse 14, we have their first date. Boaz and Ruth go to Olive Garden, right? They come up here in Olive Garden, they get breadsticks and salad. But in verse 14 it says this: at mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So she sat with the harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. But for real, this verse reminds me of Olive Garden. I mean, you got the bread, you got the salad, you sit down, you fill up on the bread and the salad. Gentlemen, if you want a good idea, date night, Olive Garden, you get one meal, you split it, fill up on breadsticks and salad, get water, and you're out of there by less than $20. Less than $20 and you're out of there. Perfect date night. I'm just kidding. Let her get whatever she wants. Ladies, let him get whatever you want. And you'll have a good night. But it says that she ate all that she needed, and she had her leftover Olive Garden afterwards. Like, she had a little to-go box to take home with her. She had everything she needed and more. So we move on, and this is a Moabite woman. I mean, think about it. And he's inviting her to his table to eat with him. And in verse 15, Boaz says this: let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time. Now, when we're reading this, it's real easy for me to skip over that and be like, all right, she's collecting barley, she's collecting wheat. I mean, who cares? But in this story, Boaz is purposely dropping the good stuff, purposely giving up the good stuff and giving it to Ruth. And he's telling his people, don't give her a hard time. He's giving up the good stuff and letting Ruth have it. And it says that she gathered an ephah of grain. And I was like, I don't know what an ephah means. And then I looked it up, and it was like 3 to 4 bushels or something like that. I was like, I still don't know what that means. And then I looked it up even more. It was like 30 to 40 pounds of grain. And to put this in perspective, a normal man's wage, an Israelite man, would have 1 to 2 pounds of grain a day. That's what he would get. And Ruth, a Moabite woman, poor, lowest on the totem pole, gets 30 to 40 pounds of grain. More than she could ask or imagine. And this is how you know that Ruth is tough, right? Because it then says that she slings that thing over her shoulder and takes it back to town. I don't know if you know me well enough, but I'm not slinging 40 pounds of anything and taking it back to town, right? Ruth was tough. And she slings that thing back over. She's got her leftover Olive Garden in her back pocket. And she brings it back, and she brings it to Naomi. And this is where the story really starts going. And Naomi sees her coming up with her 30 to 40 pounds. She sees her coming up with her Olive Garden, and she's giddy. She can't stop talking. She's like, where did you get this? Where have you been working? Ruth can't even get words out. And in this moment, we start to see this story come together, because Ruth knows where she's been working. She's been with Boaz. But Ruth has no idea who Boaz is. She has no clue that he is this family redeemer that's able to take care of them. And Naomi knows who Boaz is, but she has no clue where Ruth has been this whole time. And we get to see this story come together as Ruth is like I've been working in the field of Boaz. And Naomi's like, what? What is going on? Like, do you know who he is? He's a family redeemer. He can save us. And Naomi is just overflowing with joy at this news. This is the same Naomi that said, call me Mara because I'm bitter. This is the same Naomi that hit rock bottom, that had no hope, had lost everything, and now she's overflowing with joy. And my question to you is, could it actually be that in our deepest moments of sorrow, God is plotting for your greatest satisfaction? Listen, I know the bills are coming in. I know it seems like your marriage is struggling right now. I know that it seems like things might not go back to normal. I know it seems like that your kid is lost and they might not ever be found. I've been in situations where I felt there was no hope. I thought there was nothing left. Less than 2 weeks ago, I was in a situation where I thought there was no hope. But I know a God who brings death to life. I know a God who turns my mourning into dancing, who turns my sorrow into joy. Could it actually be that in our deepest moments of sorrow, God is actually plotting for your greatest satisfaction? Because in those moments where he seems farthest from us, he is actually laying the foundation for his greatest display of faithfulness to you. When he seems farthest away, he is setting the stage for his greatest display of faithfulness to you. And so we see in this story that now we know that Boaz is a family redeemer. Now we know, we can kind of see the story coming together. We know what's going to happen. And Naomi says, he has treated you with such kindness. And I'm going to nerd out here for a little bit. In the original Hebrew, I know everyone here is in the original Hebrew, and they're like, oh, here we go. Here we go. That word kindness is a word called hesed. And it's translated as kindness here, but in reality, this is a love so intentional, a love so intimate, that we don't even have an English translation for it. And so the best we can do is kindness. A love so intentional, so intimate. We can't even describe it in English. And that is the kind of love Boaz is showing Ruth here. And so we continue in our story in Ruth chapter 3. And Naomi hatches this plan where Ruth is going to make her move, right? It reminds me of a story when I was in California with Pastor Drew and Lauren and the rest of the staff. And Pastor Lauren hatched this plan to have my sister make her move on Jordy. And they're sitting up here engaged right now. Come on. It's not my story to tell. But Naomi hatches this plan where Ruth's going to make her move. I mean, it's a pretty weird plan. If you go back and read it, it gets pretty weird. I'm like, Naomi, man. But Ruth makes her move. The entirety of chapter 3, Ruth makes her move. And better yet, Boaz likes it. Come on, gentlemen. We're all the single gentlemen. Can we just be like, why can't the ladies just make the move? Right? Come on. They just make it easier for us. Just kidding. Gentlemen, you make the move. But Ruth makes her move. Boaz likes it. And then in Ruth chapter 4, it's a classic love story. Another guy comes into the picture. Another guy comes into play, and he's like, I'm going to redeem Ruth. Now, he has the right to redeem her first. But Boaz works his magic. Boaz makes his move, and this other dude wouldn't redeem Ruth because she was a Moabite. But Boaz, loving her with a hesed kind of love, dropped everything, and he marries Ruth. And they have a son named Obed. Like another name where I'm like, why'd they name him Obed? Come on. But we see the story come together, and Ruth and Boaz, they get married, and it all comes together. And you guys can kind of figure out in this story, if you go back and read it, God really isn't mentioned that much, except for right in the beginning of the story. That God isn't mentioned in the words on the page too much. But the story, the characters in the story, reveal the character of God. And in this story, it's crying out that we as followers of Christ should have those characteristics too. And there's 4 that I think we see happen in this story. The first one is he seeks the outcast as his own family. He seeks the outcast as his own family. Number 2, he shelters the weak under his wings. Number 3, he serves the hungry at his table. And number 4, he showers the needy with his grace. Now, it would be a crime for me to talk about the book of Ruth without talking about the overarching theme of taking care of the poor, taking care of the needy, and taking care of the foreign. It would be a crime for me not to mention these things as I'm going through Ruth because it screams it as we read Scripture. And we have so many ways to do that here at Lift Church. We're going through a Blessed Life series, and I'm so thankful that we give through a church and not to a church. That giving through Lift Church, we take care of the poor. We take care of the needy. We take care of those that can't take care of themselves. But there are so many ways that we can do this. Right now, we're helping out the Clarion Call where we're bringing toiletries to recovering addicts. Right? And it's not too late to do that. If you go out right after church and take it to the annex, we can take them to the Clarion Call. Taking care of those in need. There are so many ways that we can partner with you here at Lift Church to take care of the poor and the needy, and so many ways in our community through so many different organizations here. And I know that in this culture, it's really easy to just ignore the homeless man on the side of the road. I know it's really easy to put the blinders on and just keep on going. I do the same thing. And I also know that you can't take care of every single person you encounter. I feel that I'm like, I can't take care of them all, God. But do for one person what you wish you could do for everybody. Do for one person what you wish you could do for everyone. And number 3, characteristics of love. Love bears fruit that far outlast the one who loves. Love bears fruit that far outlasts the one who loves. In verse 17, we see this story all come together. They're married. It's a happy ending. And it says, the neighbor woman said, now at last Naomi has a son again. And they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. The grandfather of King David. You see, this story isn't just about Boaz and Ruth. This story points to the ultimate love story of Jesus Christ. Right? And I like to think about this next part as it's kind of an end credit scene. You know, in a movie where it's a really good movie and it's an end credit scene, you wait till the end and it's a teaser to the next movie. Right? And we have this end credit scene where in verse 18 to 20 it says, this is the genealogical record of their ancestor Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. And then it goes on and on and on. And it's usually the part that we skip, right? The genealogical records. Who reads those? And it says that Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of King David. You see, this story points to the greatest story of all time. And this story picks up. That's the end of the book of Ruth. And it picks up in Matthew chapter 1. And it's the genealogical record of Jesus, right? It's the part that we all skip when we read the beginning of Matthew. I'm guilty of it. I never read it. But it's so cool. In Matthew chapter 1, we see he's the father of him, and he's the father of him. And it goes on and on and on. And in the very middle, it says Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon. And on and on and on and on it goes. And then it says this. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is called the Messiah. You see, this story is so much bigger than just Ruth and Boaz. This story points to the greatest love story of all time. That Jesus Christ came down from heaven and loved us with a hesed kind of love. And he loves us like we see Boaz loving Ruth. Jesus took initiative. Jesus loved us more than we expected or deserved. And Jesus' love, obviously seen here, far outlasts the lover. And he did 4 things for us. It says he called you by name. He became our refuge. He satisfied our longings. He saved us. And my plea with you today is don't miss this. Don't miss the greatest news to ever grace the earth, that Jesus Christ came and he died for you. And that he loves you with this hesed kind of love. We don't even have an English translation for the way that he loves us. Don't miss this. He loves you in a way that is unmatched by anything. And all he wants is a true love relationship with you. He just wants to love you. He just wants to have a relationship with you. That's all he asks. And as we leave today, I want to leave you with two things. Number one is, don't get over this. Don't get over the fact that he died for you, the fact that he loves you. It's so easy to go from day-to-day life and just forget about it, or to get over it and be distracted. But don't get over this. He loves you. You know, in the story, Boaz tells Ruth, stay right here. Stay in my field. You don't need to go anywhere else. I'm going to take care of you. He said, stay in my field. And Jesus is saying today, he's saying, stay in my field. Jesus is saying, you don't need to go to all those other fields. You don't need the field of anger. You don't need the field of anxiety and depression and drugs and alcohol. You don't need those fields. He says, stay right here. He said, I'll take care of you. I have all that you need right here. And I know a lot of you are thinking, man, I feel like I am in those other fields right now. I feel like I've already gone in those other fields. That's okay. Jesus is saying, come back. There's room in my field. There's plenty to go around. He's going to love you more than you expect, more than you deserve. He has more than we could ask or imagine. He's saying, come back to my field today. Don't get over this. And the last thing today as we leave is spend your life showing this love. Spend your life loving like Boaz, loving like Jesus. It is the greatest privilege, it's the greatest honor, it's the greatest call we could have, is to love like this. Take initiative today. Love somebody more than they expect and more than they deserve, because I promise you, it's going to far outlast you for generations. And I know there are a lot of people here today, there's a lot of people watching online, that you could be thinking, man, I'm in those fields and I'm ready to come back, but I don't know how. It's easy. And if that's you today, if you're ready to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, either for the first time or if you're ready to just do it again, I'm going to ask everybody to bow your heads, eyes closed. And I just want you to slip your hand in the air real quick, just so I know who I'm praying for. Is there anybody that says, I'm ready to come back to his field? He is plenty. He's here. And if you're online, I'm praying for you. And if you have your hand in the air today, I'm going to pray with you. Will you pray with me? And all of Lift Church, pray with me. Father, thank you. Thank you for saving us. God, I'm ready to come back to your field. God, I'm ready. Father, I accept you as my Lord and Savior. Father, thank you for dying for me. You are the Lord of my life. I love you. Amen.